The crossbow bolt punched through the creature's skull with a wet crack that echoed off the marble walls. Enzo Valenti rolled behind a stone pillar as acidic blood splattered where he'd been standing, eating through the ancient floor like liquid fire. 3 down, 2 to go. Rule number 5, he muttered, reloading with practiced speed. Kill the head, the body follows. The remaining beasts circled him in the candlelit chapel beneath St. Peter's Basilica. Most tourists never knew this place existed. Most priests wished it didn't. But Enzo had spent the last 15 years of his life in these forgotten chambers, hunting things that crawled up from depths the church preferred to ignore. His radio crackled. Valenti, status report. Clean up on level 7, Enzo replied, tracking movement through the gaps between pillars. Send Dr. Reeves to analyze the blood samples when I'm done. The creatures looked like hairless dogs at first glance, until you noticed they walked on their hind legs and their mouths opened in 3 directions instead of 2. Their teeth grew in spirals, perfect for tearing flesh from bone. Enzo had been tracking this pack for 6 months, following a trail of missing persons that led from the Roman suburbs directly to the Vatican's underground network. One of them lunged from his left. Enzo spun, firing point blank into its chest. The blessed silver tip burst into white flame on contact, and the thing shrieked as holy fire consumed it from the inside out. The smell of sulfur filled the air. The last one tried to be clever, scaling the wall to drop from above, but Enzo had learned long ago to trust his instincts. Rule number 4, keep moving, never let them corner you. He was already rolling away when claws scraped stone where his head had been. Come on then, he called out, drawing his blessed silver knife. The crossbow was empty and there wasn't time to reload. Let's finish this. The creature landed in a crouch, yellow eyes fixed on him. Saliva dripped from its spiral teeth as it prepared to spring. Enzo could see the intelligence behind those eyes, the calculation. These things weren't just monsters. They were predators, evolved for this exact type of hunt. It charged. Enzo sidestepped at the last second, bringing his knife up in a rising arc that caught the creature under its jaw. Silver met flesh and the blade ignited. The beast collapsed, twitching once before going still. Silence returned to the chapel. Enzo wiped his knife clean and slipped it back into its sheath. 5 kills, clean and efficient. He activated his radio again. This is Valenti, area secure, beginning evidence collection. Copy that. Father Torino wants to see you when you're finished. Enzo groaned. Cardinal Torino never had good news. Tell His Eminence I'll be up in 20 minutes. He began the methodical process of photographing the scene and collecting samples. The Vatican's monster hunting department might be down to 1 active hunter, but they still required proper documentation. Dr. Reeves would want tissue samples, blood analysis, and detailed measurements. The scientist was one of the few people who understood what they were really dealing with down here. As he worked, Enzo's mind drifted to the rules that had kept him alive through 100 hunts like this one. His mentor, Giovanni Santori, had drilled them into him during 5 years of brutal training. Rule number 1, never hunt alone after midnight. The creatures were stronger in the deep hours, more aggressive. Enzo always made sure to finish his work before the clock struck 12. Rule number 2, always carry blessed silver. Regular weapons might slow them down, but only blessed silver could kill them permanently. He'd learned that lesson the hard way during his first solo hunt, when a creature he thought was dead got back up and nearly took his head off. Rule number 3, trust the animals. Cats, dogs, even rats could sense the creatures long before humans noticed anything wrong. When every animal in a neighborhood suddenly disappeared, it was time to start hunting. The 4th and 5th rules had saved his life more times than he could count. Keep moving, and always go for the head. Simple concepts, but execution was everything. Enzo finished his collection and headed for the elevator that would take him back to the Vatican proper. The lift was a modern addition, installed after too many hunters had died trying to climb the narrow stone stairs while injured. The church might be ancient, but it could adapt when survival demanded it. Cardinal Torino's office sat 3 levels below the Sistine Chapel, in a section of the Vatican that didn't appear on any public maps. The hallways here were wider, built to accommodate equipment and supplies that the monster hunting division needed to operate. Fluorescent lights had replaced torches, though the stone walls remained unchanged from medieval times. Enzo knocked on the heavy wooden door and entered without waiting for permission. Torino sat behind a massive oak desk, reading from a leather-bound file. The cardinal was in his 60s, with silver hair and the kind of weathered face that came from decades of making difficult decisions. He'd been running the monster hunting division since before Enzo was born. "Sit," Torino said, not looking up from his reading. Enzo dropped into the chair across from the desk. His gear clinked softly as he settled in. Crossbow slung across his back, silver knife at his hip, holy water grenades on his belt. The uniform of humanity's last line of defense against things that shouldn't exist. "The pack is eliminated," Enzo reported. 5 kills, all confirmed. Dr. Reeves will have the samples within the hour. "Good." Torino closed the file and looked up. "We have a problem, Valenti. A big one. Bigger than spiral-toothed dog creatures eating tourists? Much bigger." The cardinal slid a photograph across the desk. "This was taken yesterday morning in the Vatican gardens." Enzo picked up the photo and studied it. The image showed a section of the gardens he recognized, near the Pope's private chapel. At first glance, nothing seemed unusual. Flowers, trees, manicured grass. Then he noticed the plants. Every flower in the frame was dead, their petals black and withered. The grass had turned yellow in a perfect circle, as if something had drained the life from everything it touched. "Blight?" Enzo suggested, though he already knew it wasn't that simple. Dr. Reeves ran tests on the soil. No disease, no chemicals, no radiation. The plants simply died, all at once, sometime between midnight and dawn. Torino leaned back in his chair. "There's more." He handed Enzo another photograph. This one showed the same area, but taken from a different angle. In the center of the dead circle, barely visible in the morning light, was a footprint. Human-shaped, but too large. Much too large. 15 inches from heel to toe, Torino said. "And before you ask, yes. We checked the security footage. The cameras show nothing. For exactly 47 minutes, from 12:13 to 1 a.m., every camera in the Vatican gardens went dark." Enzo set the photographs down. In 15 years of hunting, he'd never seen anything like this. The creatures he fought were physical, tangible things that could be tracked and killed. They left blood when cut and died when stabbed. This was something else entirely. Any witnesses? Father Romano was doing his evening prayers in the chapel. He heard singing around midnight, coming from the gardens. Beautiful singing, he said. Like angels. Torino's expression darkened. Father Romano has been deaf for 30 years. The implications hit Enzo like a punch to the gut. Whatever had walked through the Vatican gardens wasn't just another creature to be hunted and killed. It was something that could affect reality itself, change the rules of the physical world. "I need to see the site," Enzo said. "Already arranged. Dr. Reeves is waiting for you there with a full analysis kit. But Valenti," Torino's voice carried a warning. "Be careful. This isn't like the things you've fought before. Your rules might not apply here." Enzo stood, checking his weapons out of habit. "They'll apply. They always have. Famous last words of every dead hunter who came before you." The Vatican gardens at night were a different world from the tourist-filled paths of daytime. Enzo made his way through the carefully maintained landscape with Dr. Reeves at his side, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The scientist was a small woman in her 40s, with sharp eyes and an analytical mind that had saved Enzo's life more than once. "The plant death is unlike anything in botanical literature," she explained as they walked. Complete cellular breakdown, but not from any known pathogen or toxin. It's as if something simply commanded the plants to stop living. They reached the affected area, and Enzo immediately understood why Torino was worried. The circle of dead vegetation was perfect, too perfect for any natural phenomenon. Everything within a 12-foot radius had died, while plants just outside the boundary remained completely healthy. The transition was sharp enough to draw with a ruler. "Soil analysis?" Enzo asked, kneeling to examine the giant footprint. "Normal in every way. pH levels, mineral content, moisture, everything exactly what you'd expect for this location. Whatever killed these plants didn't leave any trace in the ground itself." Enzo activated his flashlight and studied the footprint more closely. The impression was deep, suggesting enormous weight, but the soil around it showed no signs of disturbance. A creature heavy enough to leave such a mark should have torn up the ground with each step. "Doctor, what do you make of this depth versus the surrounding area?" Reeves joined him, taking measurements with her equipment. "The print suggests a weight of at least 400 pounds, possibly more. But there are no other markings, no trail leading to or from this spot. It's as if something extremely heavy appeared here, stood in one place long enough to kill every plant in a 12-foot circle, then vanished." "Rule number 3, Enzo muttered. "Trust the animals." "What? Have you noticed any animal behavior changes in the past few days? Cats hiding, dogs acting nervous, anything like that?" Dr. Reeves paused her measurements. "Actually, yes. The Vatican's cat population has completely disappeared. Usually there are dozens of strays living in the gardens, but I haven't seen a single one since Tuesday. 3 days ago. Whatever had made this footprint had been in the area longer than they'd initially thought. The animals had sensed it first and fled, just like rule number 3 predicted. That was something, at least. His mentor's wisdom still applied. We need to expand the search, Enzo decided. If this thing has been here for 3 days, there might be other sites. They spent the next 2 hours combing through the gardens with portable scanning equipment. Dr. Reeves had developed the gear specifically for tracking supernatural threats, and it had proven invaluable in Enzo's work. The scanners could detect temperature variations, electromagnetic anomalies, and chemical traces that regular instruments missed. "Got something," Reeves called out from near the Pope's private chapel. Another dead zone, smaller than the first one. Enzo jogged over to find a second circle of withered plants, this one only 6 feet in diameter. No footprint this time, but the pattern of death was identical. Every plant within the circle had died simultaneously, while vegetation just outside remained untouched. 2 sites, both near religious buildings, Enzo observed. It's targeting sacred ground. Or it's drawn to places of power, Dr. Reeves suggested. The Vatican isn't just symbolically important. According to church records, there are 17 different sanctified sites within these walls, each one blessed by a pope over the centuries. Meaning? Meaning whatever this is, it might be feeding on spiritual energy. The places where it appeared are 2 of the most heavily blessed locations in the entire Vatican. Enzo felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. If Dr. Reeves was right, they weren't dealing with just another monster. They were facing something that could consume the very foundations of faith itself. His radio crackled to life. "Valenti, report to the command center immediately. We have a situation." "On my way." He turned to Dr. Reeves. "Pack up everything. I want full analysis on both sites by morning." "Enzo," she called as he started walking away. "Whatever this is, it's not like the creatures you usually hunt. Your standard tactics might not work. Then I'll adapt." He touched the silver knife at his hip. That's what hunters do. The command center was chaos when Enzo arrived. 3 technicians worked frantically at computer stations while Cardinal Torino stood over them, his face grim. Wall-mounted screens showed feeds from security cameras throughout the Vatican, and every single one displayed the same disturbing image: static. "How long?" Enzo asked. "Started 15 minutes ago," Torino replied. "Every camera in the Vatican went dark simultaneously. We're completely blind. Just like the gardens 3 nights ago." "Exactly like the gardens. But this time it's not isolated to one area. Whatever's out there, it's affecting the entire complex." Enzo studied the screens, looking for any pattern in the interference. The static wasn't random. It pulsed in regular intervals, almost like a heartbeat. "Dr. Reeves thinks it feeds on spiritual energy. If she's right, cutting us off from surveillance is just the first step." "First step toward what?" "Total isolation. If it can blind our cameras, it might be able to cut our communications next. Then power then." Enzo didn't finish the thought. If something could systematically disable the Vatican's defenses, there would be nowhere to run. One of the technicians looked up from his station. "Sir, I'm picking up audio on the emergency frequency." "Put it on speakers." The command center filled with the sound of singing, beautiful ethereal voices harmonizing in perfect pitch. The melody was unlike anything Enzo had ever heard, hauntingly lovely but somehow wrong at the same time. It made his skin crawl even as part of his mind wanted to listen forever. "That's the same sound Father Romano heard," Torino whispered. "The night the plants died." The singing continued for 30 seconds, then stopped abruptly. In the silence that followed, the screens flickered back to life. Security cameras throughout the Vatican resumed their normal feeds, showing empty hallways and gardens lit by moonlight. "Well," Enzo said, checking his weapons. "Now we know it's here. What's the plan?" Enzo thought about the 5 rules that had kept him alive through 15 years of hunting. Never hunt alone after midnight. Always carry blessed silver. Trust the animals. Keep moving. Kill the head. They seemed inadequate for whatever was stalking the Vatican, but they were all he had. "I'm going hunting," he said simply. "Absolutely not. We don't know what we're dealing with. It could be killing innocent people while we stand here debating." Enzo headed for the door. "I'll take a radio and check in every 15 minutes. If you don't hear from me by dawn, seal the Vatican and call Rome for backup." "Valenti, this is suicide." "No," Enzo said, pausing at the threshold. "This is my job." He stepped into the hallway and immediately felt the difference. The air was colder, thick with an energy that made his teeth ache. Whatever had entered the Vatican was powerful beyond anything he'd faced before. But power could be defeated with the right tactics and enough determination. Rule number 4. Keep moving. Enzo began to hunt. The Vatican's corridors had never felt this hostile. Enzo moved through the marble hallways with his crossbow ready, blessed silver bolts loaded and waiting. The air hummed with an energy that made his fillings ache and set his nerves on edge. Whatever was stalking these sacred halls wasn't just another creature to be hunted. It was something that could reshape reality itself. His radio crackled softly. "Valenti, status report. Level 3, East Wing. No contact yet." He kept his voice low, though he suspected stealth wouldn't matter much against something that could make deaf priests hear singing. "Copy that. We're showing temperature drops throughout the building. Whatever's in there with you, it's big." Enzo rounded a corner and stopped. The hallway ahead was covered in frost, ice crystals growing from the walls in delicate, branching patterns. His breath misted as the temperature plummeted 20 degrees in the span of a few steps. At the far end of the corridor, a door stood open that he knew had been locked and sealed for over a century: the entrance to the Borgian chambers. Pope Alexander VI had ordered those rooms walled up after his death, claiming they contained things too dangerous for future generations to discover. The Vatican's official records listed them as storage, but Enzo knew better. His mentor had told him stories about what really lay behind those sealed doors. Artifacts and texts that the church had decided were too powerful to exist. "Command, I'm at the Borgian chambers. The seals have been broken." "That's not possible. Those doors are 3 feet of solid stone." "Then our friend is stronger than we thought." Enzo approached the opening carefully, crossbow raised. The temperature continued to drop as he moved closer. "I'm going in." "Negative. Wait for backup." "There is no backup," Enzo reminded them. "I'm all we've got." He stepped through the doorway and immediately understood why Alexander VI had sealed these rooms. The chamber beyond was vast, far larger than should have been possible given the Vatican's floor plan. Shelves lined the walls from floor to ceiling, packed with books, scrolls, and artifacts that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. The air itself felt alive, charged with centuries of accumulated spiritual energy. And in the center of it all stood the most beautiful woman Enzo had ever seen. She was tall, easily 7 feet, with flowing hair that seemed to move in a wind he couldn't feel. Her skin was pale as marble, and her eyes were the deep blue of midnight sky. She wore robes that shifted color as she moved, sometimes white, sometimes gold, sometimes the deep red of fresh blood. When she saw him, she smiled, and her voice filled the chamber like music. "The hunter arrives at last. Giovanni spoke of you often before he died." Enzo kept his crossbow trained on her, though he wondered if blessed silver would have any effect. "You knew my mentor? I killed your mentor." Her smile never wavered. "He was the one who banished me to this place, sealed me behind stone and iron and faith. 23 years I have waited for the barriers to weaken enough for my escape." Rule number 5 echoed in Enzo's mind. Kill the head, the body follows. But what was the head of something like this? "What are you?" "I am Seraphiel, the singing star, the voice that calls from heaven's height. I am the angel who fell not from pride, but from love." She gestured to the artifacts around them. "Do you know what these are, little hunter? These are the instruments of miracles, weapons that could level mountains, books that could rewrite the laws of nature, chalices that could grant eternal life. The church has hoarded them for centuries, using their power to maintain control while denying salvation to the world." Salvation through destruction? Salvation through truth. I will take these gifts and use them as they were meant to be used. No more hiding behind stone walls and whispered prayers. No more denying humanity its birthright. Her voice rose, and the air around her began to shimmer. I will sing creation itself into a new shape, make a world where every soul can touch the divine. Enzo had heard enough speeches from megalomaniacs to know how this ended. And everyone who disagrees with your vision dies. Everyone who stands in the way of paradise must be removed. Yes. Beginning with you. Seraphiel raised her hands and began to sing. The sound was beautiful beyond description, harmonies that seemed to come from multiple voices at once. But Enzo had been trained by the best monster hunter in Vatican history, and Giovanni had taught him to recognize weapons regardless of their form. He fired. The blessed silver bolt passed through Seraphiel's chest without leaving a mark, as if she were made of light instead of flesh. She continued singing, and the artifacts around the chamber began to glow brighter. Books flipped open to reveal pages covered in symbols that hurt to look at. Chalices overflowed with liquid that might have been wine or blood. Weapons hummed with barely contained power. Rule number 4. Keep moving. Enzo rolled to his left as Seraphiel gestured in his direction. The floor where he'd been standing erupted in flames that burned cold instead of hot. He came up running, reloading his crossbow as he sprinted between the towering shelves. Physical attacks might not work, but there had to be another way. You cannot hide from me, hunter. Seraphiel's voice followed him through the chamber. I can hear your heartbeat, smell your fear, You are nothing but a mortal man with mortal weapons facing the power of creation itself." Another gesture, and the shelf beside Enzo exploded into splinters. Ancient texts scattered across the floor, their pages glowing with contained magic. He dove behind a stone altar and tried to think. His weapons were useless. He was outmatched in every possible way. And the creature hunting him had access to artifacts that could reshape reality. But he was still alive, which meant she wasn't as powerful as she claimed. If she could simply will him out of existence, why bother with fire and destruction? There had to be limits to her abilities, rules she had to follow even if they weren't the same rules that governed normal creatures. His radio crackled. "Valenti, we're reading massive energy spikes from your location. What's your status? Engaged with hostile? Angel-class threat? Possibly rogue seraph? Physical weapons ineffective." "Angel-class?" Torino's voice cut through the static. "Dear God, it's really her. We thought she was a legend." "Well, she's very real and very angry. Any suggestions would be appreciated." The Borgian chambers contain the Spear of Longinus, Constantine's binding ritual, the original Seal of Solomon. If you can reach any of those... The transmission cut off as Seraphiel's song reached a crescendo. The air in the chamber began to twist and bend, colors bleeding together like wet paint. Enzo felt gravity shift, pulling him sideways toward one of the walls. He grabbed hold of the altar and held on as books and artifacts flew through the air around him. "Enough hiding!" Seraphiel's voice boomed through the chaos. "Face me, Hunter, and learn what true power looks like." Enzo looked around desperately for any of the artifacts Torino had mentioned. The Spear of Longinus would be recognizable, the weapon that had pierced Christ's side. But the chamber was enormous and filled with thousands of relics. He could search for hours without finding the right one. Then he remembered rule number 3. Trust the animals. Not just cats and dogs, but all living things. And there, crawling across the floor despite the chaos around them, were dozens of white mice, Vatican mice, descendants of creatures that had lived in these halls for centuries. They were all moving in the same direction, toward a far corner of the chamber where a simple wooden cross hung on the wall. Not the Spear of Longinus, but something else. Something the mice recognized as important. Enzo released his grip on the altar and let gravity carry him toward the wall. He twisted in midair, landing hard, but rolling to absorb the impact. Seraphiel's song faltered for a moment as she tracked his movement, and normal physics reasserted themselves. Books crashed to the floor and the swirling colors settled back into their proper places. The wooden cross was crude, obviously handmade, with iron nails driven through the intersection of the beams. A small plaque beneath it read, "From the Church of San Clemente, Rome. Gift of Pope Nicholas I, 867 AD. Not just any cross. This was one of the original relics, blessed by a pope who had faced supernatural threats himself. Nicholas I had been known for his battles against dark forces, his absolute faith in the face of creatures that defied explanation. If any artifact in this chamber could stand against a fallen angel, it would be something he had personally sanctified. Enzo reached for the cross just as Seraphiel appeared beside him, moving faster than thought. Her hand closed around his throat, lifting him off the ground with casual strength. "Did you really think a piece of wood could save you?" She laughed, and the sound was like crystal breaking. "I am beyond your primitive symbols, Hunter. I am..." Enzo wrapped his fingers around the cross and pressed it against her wrist. The effect was immediate and devastating. Seraphiel screamed, a sound that shattered every piece of glass in the chamber and sent cracks racing across the stone walls. White light poured from the point of contact, spreading up her arm like liquid fire. She dropped Enzo and staggered backward, her perfect features twisting in agony. "Impossible," she gasped. "That relic should have no power over me. I am not some common demon to be banished by..." "Rule number 2, Enzo said, climbing to his feet. "Always carry blessed silver." He drew his knife and stepped forward. The blade gleamed with holy light as it absorbed power from the cross in his other hand. Seraphiel raised her hands to defend herself, but the white fire was spreading across her body, burning away her stolen beauty to reveal something twisted and broken underneath. "You fell from love," Enzo continued, pressing his attack. "But love twisted into obsession becomes its own kind of evil. You don't want to save humanity. You want to control it." "I want to perfect it," Seraphiel shrieked. "I want to lift every soul to paradise." Against their will, without their choice. Enzo feinted left, then struck right, driving the blessed blade deep into her chest. "That's not salvation. That's damnation." The knife pierced whatever passed for her heart, and Seraphiel's song became a wail of pure anguish. The stolen artifacts around the chamber began to dim as her power over them failed. Books closed themselves, weapons went silent, and the chalices stopped overflowing. This is not how it was supposed to end," she whispered, collapsing to her knees. "I was going to bring them such wonders." "Maybe," Enzo said, not unkindly, "but that wasn't your choice to make." Seraphiel looked up at him one last time, and for a moment her face was beautiful again, young and hopeful and filled with the kind of love that could move mountains. Then the light faded from her eyes, and she crumbled to dust, leaving only empty robes and the echo of silenced song. Enzo stood alone in the chamber, surrounded by artifacts that had been used to threaten the world and were now just historical curiosities again. His radio crackled back to life as normal physics reasserted itself throughout the Vatican. "Valenti, respond. What's your status?" "Target eliminated," he replied, holstering his knife. "Area secure." "Thank God. We were worried when communications went down." Enzo looked around the chamber one more time, taking inventory of the threats that would need to be secured. The church had hidden these artifacts for good reason, and they would need to remain hidden. Some knowledge was too dangerous for the world to possess. "Send Dr. Reeves and a containment team," he said. "We've got a lot of cleanup to do." 3 hours later, Enzo sat in Cardinal Torino's office, writing his final report on the Seraphiel incident. The Vatican was returning to normal operations, though it would take weeks to properly catalog and secure all the artifacts in the Borgian chambers. Dr. Reeves had already started the process, working with a team of specialists flown in from Rome. "So what happens now?" Torino asked, reading over Enzo's shoulder. "Now we seal the chambers again, properly this time. Post guards, install monitoring equipment, make sure nothing like this can happen again." Enzo signed the report and set down his pen. "And we start training new hunters." "New hunters?" "The program was discontinued after Giovanni's death. You're the last." "Then it's time to restart it." Enzo stood, checking his weapons out of habit. Seraphiel was trapped for 23 years, and she still nearly succeeded in her plan. There are other things out there, other threats we haven't even imagined yet. One hunter isn't enough anymore. Torino nodded slowly. "You have someone in mind?" "Dr. Reeves. She's already familiar with the work, she's smart enough to adapt to new situations, and she's brave enough to face creatures that shouldn't exist. With proper training, she could be ready for field work in 6 months." "And after her?" Enzo thought about the 5 rules that had kept him alive through 15 years of hunting. They were simple concepts, easy to teach and remember. But more importantly, they worked. Giovanni had passed them down to him, and now it was time for him to pass them on to the next generation. After her, we find others, priests who've seen too much to doubt, scientists who understand that reality has more flexibility than most people think, soldiers who face the kind of enemies that don't show up in training manuals. He headed for the door. "The Vatican needs protectors, Your Eminence. Real ones, not just ceremonial guards. And you're willing to train them?" Enzo paused at the threshold, thinking about all the creatures he'd killed, All the threats he'd eliminated, all the innocent lives he'd saved. The work was dangerous and thankless, and most people would never know it existed. But it was necessary work, vital work, and someone had to do it. "It's my job," he said simply, and walked out into the hallway. The Vatican's corridors felt normal again, filled with the quiet bustle of daily operations. Tourists would return tomorrow, priests would conduct their services, and life would continue as if nothing had happened. That was how it should be. The world deserved to sleep peacefully, unaware of the monsters that lurked in the spaces between reality and nightmare. But Enzo Valenti would be watching. He would be ready. And soon, he wouldn't be watching alone. Rule number 6, he thought to himself as he made his way to the training facilities. Never let the monsters win. It wasn't one of Giovanni's original rules, but Enzo figured his mentor would approve. After all, the best hunters were the ones who adapted to new situations while holding on to the principles that kept them alive. And Enzo Valenti intended to live long enough to see a new generation of hunters carry on the work. The Vatican's monster hunting division was far from finished. In fact, it was just getting started.